Good morning. I'm Anna Rose. I'm the head of the Planning Advisory Service, and I'm talking to Steve Bambrick, the Corporate Director for Planning, Growth and Sustainability at Buckinghamshire Council. Always have to read the names. And this morning we're going to be talking about LGR, so Local Government Reorganisation, and how you take a planning service through that process. And why we're doing that is because a lot of councils are going to be going through this process, and a lot of planning directors are going to be leading their services. So, Steve, could you start by talking us through Buckinghamshire history, and then I suppose the journey to this single unitary council?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Anna. Morning, and thank you for inviting me to talk about this. It's for Buckinghamshire, it's quite an in-depth history, I guess. So it goes back a long way. I mean, my personal history with Buckinghamshire starts in sort of 2017, when I personally then joined what was the two of the district councils, so Chiltern and South Bucks district councils, working in partnership under one management team. I joined there as director, and then latterly as chief executive. There was a lot of, well, there was certainly no consensus in Buckinghamshire around the need for unitarisation, and obviously at that stage there was a requirement for local agreements, or even what the model should be. The former county council had a view that there should be a single unitary model for Buckinghamshire. The districts, if they were kind of forced into it, were much preferred a two unitary model.
Yeah.
In the end, there was a decision taken in 2019 by the Secretary of State that we would go with a single unitary model, and we had a year from that decision to implementation. So we established pretty quickly the shadow arrangements, shadow executive, and all of the arrangements there, and all of the members, all of the kind of lead members from all of the councils had a place on the shadow executive, which was really clunky, but it was the way it kind of operated. We went live in 2020, in at the end of March 2020, which also coincided almost exactly with COVID lockdown. So you can imagine, all of our plans for how we were going to operate and how we were going to operate as this single council were just completely out the window, because actually our priority then was how do we support the kind of the COVID effort effectively, nationally, and so I came into the unitary organisation as the director for planning. Whereas in fact, my first 3 months were spent dealing with, mortuary spaces and transport and supporting the NHS like everybody else. So, so that was difficult. But nevertheless, we kind of got through it. We also had, we went live with 202 councillors in Buckinghamshire, because we kind of crashed all of the councillors into one. We were due that May to have local elections, so the plan was we'll go live with 202 councillors, we'd run for about 6 weeks, we'd have local elections, and we would go down to 147, I think it was. Of course, the local elections were cancelled because of COVID, so we actually had a year of operating with 202 members, largely remotely. And it wasn't until the following year, when we had the local elections, that we went down to 147. At the last election, we went down again to 98. So that's our kind of steady state now. So it's taken us 5 years to get to that level, but that's where we were. During the shadow period, we had a lot of times when we were talking about, well, how do we operate? How do we want the planning service to operate? And again, you can imagine there was all sorts of kind of political interest in, how we operate as District A is much better than how District B operates, and so we should do what District A does rather than District B. and there was lots of discussion about that. We ended up setting up a bit of a working group with the members. We had a member of the shadow executive who was assigned to the kind of planning portfolio, and he set up a kind of an advisory group really of members from across the different councils to work that through. So we ended up through that process with a kind of a working protocol of how we wanted to operate, because of course we wanted to try and make sure that we were doing things consistently across the patch. I don't think in the end we kind of we fully got there, but it was okay, and we kind of and it works. I think the thing that we did do when we went live with 5 area planning committees and 1 strategic sites committee, which is for our major developments. I think with the benefit of hindsight now, that was far too many committees. I mean, it kept a lot of the members occupied. We had 202 of them to keep occupied, and having effectively 6 planning committees kept many of them very occupied. But we didn't have a lot of business going through them, and of course they were operating remotely largely as well. But it took us a long time. So we now operate with 3 area committees and 1 strategic site, and it's taken us, again, effectively the 5-year period for us to kind of move away from the 5 area committee model. Members liked it because it almost replicated the old district model, and getting into our mindset that we were no longer district councils, we're operating as a unitary council, was difficult, and it's taken us that time. So part of my learning, I think, and part of my advice to people is to try and it's hard, but try and think before you even get to day one how you want to operate as a unitary, not how you want to try and replicate how you operated as districts and county, because you'll spend a lot of time then trying to row back from where you started from. So I think if I had my time again, I think I would have fought harder for definitely fewer planning committees, because the level of workload that was going through the committees was pretty low, to be honest. But as I say, you make some practical choices at the time, and it kind of worked. But I think with the benefit of hindsight, we would have moved away from that, I think.
Sorry to jump in there, do you think though that you had to go through that to get to where you are now? So is it, because it's hard, isn't it, reflecting back to think what you should have done and what you could have done? I think COVID creates a really sort of weird scenario for everybody. If we think about operation during COVID, it skewed our ways of working, didn't it? And so if you talk to other councils that have been through this before you, so Cornwall, BCP, those sort of councils, I think looking back, they had a similar issue as well. They had lots of committees moving down to fewer committees. So I'm just wondering if it's just part of the path, or could you have done it differently?
Well, so my view, I think, is that it depends where you start from. So again, in Buckinghamshire, there was no consensus around even wanting to be a unitary council. It felt a little bit at the end when the decision was made by the Secretary of State that we're going to have one, that for some people it felt a bit forced upon us. And as a consequence of that, I think there were some members in particular, but I think staff equally, and equally residents, that felt like they were kind of losing something. So having a unitary council meant we were going to lose something, and so I think as a consequence of that, we spent quite a lot of time therefore trying to keep hold of things that we didn't want to lose. And I go back to this is how we do it here. everybody got very protective about how they did their bit, and I think the consequence of that, or the solution to that, was to try and allow everybody to have a little bit of what they did in the new system. And part of that was, well, let's try and keep as many committees as possible. So you ended up with committees in quite small parts of the county, operating as almost mini district planning committees. And so certainly for us, I think the conversation at that stage to go straight to, well, that's not really how we're going to operate as a unitary. Let's look at what other unitaries are doing. And of course, we were doing that. We were talking to colleagues in Durham and Wiltshire in particular. We had somebody from Wiltshire who was actually part of our kind of working group. So we could see how other unitaries were operating, and we were sharing that. But we were still also trying to deal with the sense of loss for a lot of people, that actually we were moving away from something that they really liked, they really thought worked, and that whatever the new model was going to be, it was going to be worse. So now I think if we were in a different place, if we started from a different place, which was everybody around the table saying, this is a positive change, and we absolutely want to embrace this, and there will be others in other parts of the country who will be in that position. I think you're in a much stronger place to then say, well, let's see actually how this can work positively. So you're right. I think in our position, it probably was a step too far to say, hold on, that's just not going to work. Let's do this instead. But you're right. So it's horses for courses to some extent, I think. But we spent, oh goodness knows how much time we spent on things like the call-in procedures, whether what planning, what parish councils could do in the new planning system, and what their role was going to be, and could we give them some power in the process, the number of councillors that were going to be on the committees, all of that sort of stuff was just really important. But I think actually, again, looking back, it's because people were being quite protective about how we did things in the old world, and they wanted to try and protect that. And actually, again, now with the benefit of 5 years hence, most of that has been washed away, because we've actually got new ways of working, and we operate much more as a big unitary authority than we ever would have done on day one.
Yeah, and so so that advisory board that was in place, do you think that was a key bit of governance?
I mean, we had all the formal stuff. So we had the shadow exec. We had the kind of officer implementation. I can't even remember what it was called now, but it was something like the officer implementation group, which was all of the chief execs and senior directors from the different different councils. We split ourselves into kind of working areas, which turned out in the end to be the formation of the new directorates for the new council. And senior people from within each of those councils were effectively assigned as the head of each of those areas of work, and they fed a kind of an action plan of work for each of those different areas. And so we had teams and teams of officers who were doing lots of work underneath the kind of surface. That officer implementation group fed the shadow executive, which as I say was effectively the shadow cabinet, and became the cabinet for the first year, which was, again, I think we had something like 20, because every council had two representation. We had, I think, something like 23 members on the shadow executive, and because of COVID, we ended up having to run with that for a year as cabinet as well. So we had an enormous cabinet, but that governance kind of sat in that place. But we established the kind of the advisory group, not just in planning, but in a number of areas, to try and get into some of that detail, which was not for the shadow executive to get into, albeit when we came up with the recommendations, which would be effectively what would go into the new constitution about how planning would work, that it was the work of that advisory group that fed up through those governance processes and the shadow executive was able to agree to it pretty quickly because they knew there was buy-in across the membership. So but yeah, so it worked pretty well that from that side of it.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it in terms of sometimes those advisory groups that don't have the formal structures are able to have conversations that are not possible in some of those more formal environments, which what you've just described is that it just eases, it sort of oils the wheels, doesn't it? The cogs for things to get through, which I don't know, would that be something you'd recommend as good practice in terms of people doing this, in planning particularly?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, everybody's got a view, haven't they, on planning and how it should work. And I think lots of members, were really interested in, the mechanics of planning. So finding that vehicle for having those informal conversations was important. The difficulty, I guess, we had was selecting who should be on those, and I mean, in the end, it became a collection of members from the legacy councils who were on cabinets with planning in their roles, plus a selection of chairs from the planning committees from across the different councils as well. So they all had quite a lot of experience about dealing with planning. But we tried to get a geographic spread. We tried to make sure that they had some expertise, if you like, or some experience in planning. But again, even then, that became quite a big group of people. But and you wouldn't always get consensus on things. But ultimately, the responsibility rested with the shadow executive member to decide, if we can't agree, I'm going to go with this rather than that. But it worked, and I think that's right. I think the danger of not having that is you end up just having the formal processes, and either people don't feel that they've been listened to, or you'll just run into difficulties in getting some of this stuff over the line. And time runs so quick. I mean, we had a year from decision to go live. That goes so quickly, and you haven't got the luxury of having to going around the loop a few times. You've got to make a decision, go with it, get it through the processes. I mean, the good thing is, the clock doesn't stop once you go live. If you think something's not working, go back and change it. Don't beat yourself up about, well, we've made that decision now, we've got to stick with it forever. And that's what we've ended up doing over the last 5 years, is that incrementally you'll revisit things that you made the decision at the time for all the right reasons, but it's time to unpick it and let's do it in a more logical way. So you've always got that ability to do that, and that would be my other bit of advice for people is don't see that go live time as a cliff edge. It's not. You need to be in a place where you can make legal decisions and sound decisions, but you've always got time after the event to put things in a better place than they are. So that's certainly one thing I'd learned from it.
And so thinking then of day one, so that launch date, given what you've just said about it's not fixing everything, it's just a launch date, you've got to be sound. I'm wondering about officers. So a bit of our experience at PAS is that getting officers to a place where they recognise they're part of one council rather than their council they've just come from is quite difficult. So did you establish that from day one, that right, you work for Buckinghamshire Council, that's our body, that's who you're representing, all of that stuff, or has that been a work in progress?
Well, and again, context is always important, because I think everybody was working from home at that time. And we literally had switched to everybody being at home all of the time at that stage. So we had done a lot of work, not just with the planning service, but with lots of teams across all of the councils about, we'd done a lot of work around the branding of the council. We'd done work around the values and the kind of corporate, what was the corporate plan? What were our priorities for the council? So the shadow executive did a lot of work around that, and we agreed those key things, which were not just about planning, but they were for everybody in the new council. We also appointed the corporate management team and all of the directors that sat beneath that prior to vesting day as well. So we had, if you like, the senior, and again, through our COVID lens, that was enormously helpful to have the kind of senior management team all in place for day one. I mean, there are certain things that continue to drive cultures in different places, which are not just about culture. So, for example, the systems that you use, the back office systems that you use, they're all similar, but they're not quite the same. And again, that drives behaviours. The process that we follow is this, and this, and the process that our neighbours follow is slightly different. And again, that drives behaviours. And fixing and putting in place those back office systems, and we still haven't got that sorted now. As I sit here today, we still have projects running now where we're trying to have a much more consistent back office system. That's a complex issue that, again, I would say to people, think through that, because that's something that will be important to everybody. But as well as that, you've got the kind of key messages. We set up very early a kind of a planning improvement board. We had people on that board. We had members on that board. We had external kind of critical friends on that board. We had lots of work streams running, one of which was around culture and behaviours, to try and make sure we were driving through the service that kind of single vision of how we do things around here. It's not easy. I mean, and it was equally very difficult when you weren't having those conversations with people face to face. When as the director of planning, having a single Teams meeting with the whole of your department on Teams, when actually not everybody was very familiar with Teams, and we had cameras on and off, and people on and off mute, and televisions going in the background, all that sort of stuff was happening. So it was very difficult to try and get some key messages across. So I think that's always been a work in progress. And again, part of the difficulty is about the overall size of the organ. Just appreciating you're going from, my background was in district councils, appreciating that, you're going from a pretty small organisation to an enormous organisation with, literally thousands of people. And so your approach as a senior leader as well needs to change to how you're kind of getting your message across, and how you're communicating to your staff, and how visible you can be. And again, that's difficult in the times of COVID. But certainly since COVID, that kind of visibility point, I think, has been really important about how you kind of get that message across to people.
Yeah, and just to give people a bit of context around Buckinghamshire then, so amount of applications coming through your door. So I'm putting you on the spot here, Steve. Can you put your finger in your ear?
This is something we're really familiar with. So we're about so all applications, which includes kind of variations, etc. We're about 12,000 applications a year. So we're one of, if not the busiest in terms of just volume. Quite a lot of those are minor applications inevitably, but we have very significant numbers. I mean, we're obviously on the edge of London. We've got some big kind of employment area. We've got 3 enterprise zones in the county. So we've got Pinewood Studios, and we've got the kind of creative industry arc in the south of the county. We've got Silverstone and the kind of technology hub in the north of the county. We've got Westcott, which is our kind of space technology hub, which is also one of our enterprise zones in the centre near Aylesbury. So we've got some big growth areas, and we've also, and we might get onto our new local plan, but we're busy working on our new local plan, which under the new standard methodology requires us to build around 95,000 new homes over the next 20 years as well. So, we've got some big challenges in terms of overall numbers of applications and moving forward, looking at how we are going to increase the level of growth across the county and all the infrastructure challenges that brings as well. So that, lots going on, and we've got lots of people who are really skilled and talented at trying to deal with that across Buckinghamshire. But as a leader of that type of organisation, that takes up a huge amount of time, just making sure you've kind of try and stay connected with all of the things that are going on.
And also, actually, I think the point you made, going from district level to that, is a big jump for most people, isn't it? I mean, for you individually, but also for all the teams that have gone from a district level. It's just a different scale of activity. And also your position in it, if you're, a principal planner or a senior planner or somebody like that, your position in it is very different, actually, and so the culture shock, I suppose, of that move has to run through as well, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I think certainly from day one, I mean, and one of our key messages to all of the staff was, look, yesterday you were sat in the office with a computer dealing with planning applications, and tomorrow you'll be still sat in the same office with the same computer dealing with planning. It's the same planning application. So, please don't think that the change for you individually on that, on a day-to-day basis is going to be dramatic, but there is an incremental piece that actually, as a unitary authority, we're far more able, I think, to join the dots, and our expectation over time of our managers and of our staff has been for them to also think through the kind of the wider implications of what they do. And planning gets to see this all the time. We, like other places, we have our challenges around things like provision of temporary accommodation and the numbers of homelessness applications. We've got challenges around accommodation for care leavers and some of the kind of financial challenges that brings for us. We've got social care pressures and the need for more supported accommodation. And we as a organisation are able to help solve some of those problems, and planning as a service it has a lot of those levers that will help us solve those problems. And I mean, one of the things I've been really pleased with the service is the extent to which people within the service think that through now, almost as a matter of course. Whereas I think if I reflect back on day one, those sorts of levers were not being pulled automatically, and those sort of thought processes were not happening as a matter of course, because the issues were largely disconnected, because a lot of those things were kind of old county council issues, and they were under the surface a lot. They're now part and parcel of the same organisation. But that is not a day one issue. That is something that over time, and it takes a lot of work to get there, but it's really great to see how staff appreciate the wider pressures on an organisation such as ours.
And it's not just about the pressures, is it? That's about the opportunities from a professional level as well. Because as you were talking that through, Steve, I felt that sort of warm feeling about, actually, that's what we get into this for, isn't it? To solve some of those wider social issues and to prepare an area for that. I think that's something that certainly working in universities that you hear from students is that's the sort of work they want to get into.
Completely right. I mean, completely. I mean, I mentioned some of our big businesses in the county. We've got some great businesses. We've got some great links into the capital, we in Buckinghamshire have the opportunity to kind of grow some of the key areas that are kind of key in the industrial strategy for the country. So we and again, all of that kind of ends up coming through and being guided by the kind of planning service, and seeing how you are able to have an influence on what not just what happens locally, but actually what can happen positively nationally, and even in some cases when you look at things like the creative industries and film and TV internationally as well. We have one of the biggest kind of creative industry sectors in the world here in Buckinghamshire. And how do we help support them to grow is a key part of our local plan. It's a key part of what we do in our development management service. And we've got people who are really skilled in that sort of stuff. So you're absolutely right. It's what you go into planning for, is to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're selling it well. Into local plans then, where just for listeners, Steve and I first met in local plans, where Steve was my first manager in local government. So this is, I suppose, serendipitous, isn't it? We're back to where we started. So local plans, Steve, where are you with your local plan? You mentioned it. I mean, that must be challenging across that huge area.
Yeah. So, and again, others listening in will recognise this, I think, if they're going through LGR. But we inherited legacy local plans, all in different stages. We just adopted or the previous council had just adopted the Wickham local plan, what was the Wickham district local plan. We were about to adopt, and the new council eventually did adopt, the Vale of Aylesbury local plan. So we got partial coverage there. We had a minerals and waste local plan that was adopted by the county council, and then the south of the county, Chiltern and South Bucks, we ended up withdrawing that local plan. It was partway through the process, but we ended up withdrawing that. So we've got partial coverage across the county, and we've been working ever since on a replacement single county-wide local plan. We've had a few false starts with that, not least because every time we thought we were kind of getting close to producing something, the goalposts would change, nationally. And that's not to point the finger necessarily just at the national picture, but the national picture moving hasn't helped. But we're now we are in a place where we've just completed actually a Reg 18 consultation on our new local plan, and that's the plan, as I mentioned earlier, that is going to find a way of how do we grow the county to accommodate the kind of 95,000 new homes, 250 hectares of employment land. We've got some big infrastructure challenges. We've got HS2 that runs from north to south in the county. We've got East West Rail running across the north of the county. We've got Heathrow expanding on our border at in the south. Some really big changes happening in and around us from an infrastructure perspective that we're also having to accommodate. And the local plan is our kind of our vehicle for making sure we can do that in an orderly way.
Yeah.
We expect to do we are planning to publish the Reg 19 next summer.
Right. Okay.
And submit before the December 26th deadline. That's our plan, and that's where we'll go into. So we've got a team of people who are working furiously at trying to make sure we achieve that.
They're going to have to.
Yeah.
So in terms of strategic development strategies, then I would think for Buckinghamshire that's going to be really helpful. So you need a local plan now, but actually being able to, as a strategic planning authority, set out a strategic vision and then do the local plan, for me it's really helpful, because you don't have to do it all in one great big bite, and you can deal with some of the bigger issues at that strategic layer, and then you can illustrate it and deliver it at the local level. How do you feel about that?
So it's semi-complicated in this part of the world,
Right.
but by the whole conversation around devolution.
Yeah.
So we in Buckinghamshire have agreed with the previous government, but the current government are honouring this, a kind of what was called a level 2
Yeah.
devolution deal, which is the kind of non-mayoral single local authority deal. That's kind of working its way through Parliament. And so we'd expect to have that completed again, probably early next year. What and of course we are part of the Oxford to Cambridge growth corridor. And what's not entirely clear at the moment is how the kind of geography around combined authorities, strategic authorities is going to work. And it's always been complicated, particularly in this kind of middle part of the corridor, as to what might be an effective geography. Buckinghamshire's position has always been, actually, Buckinghamshire has links to lots of different areas, and actually we as a single geography, we were co-terminus with our LEP. The LEP is now part of the council, but co-terminus with our LEP. We've got NHS on the same footprint as Buckinghamshire. Actually, from a strategic perspective, Buckinghamshire is quite a well-defined area. So I think philosophically and from a principal point of view, I think the strategic planning has a lot to offer, I think, and a lot to support the kind of local planning system. I mean, I started my career in strategic planning, working on old structure plans up in the northeast. And so I think that kind of, in principle, making some big choices at the strategic level absolutely works. And in an ideal world, you'd get to that place where those big decisions are taken and the local plans follow. Whether we ever can get to that place where that sort of process follows is yet to be seen. But certainly in this part of the world, it's going to be really important for us to sort out the geography of the place before we can kind of get to that. And I don't know how easy that's going to be. It feels quite a complicated issue for the government to try and get around. But definitely, my position as a planner, I guess, is that strategic planning can really work if it's done effectively.
Yeah, and actually, what I was thinking is around some of the big items that your local plan is having to lift at the moment. Actually, a bit of strategic cover would be quite helpful. So that's a personal opinion. I'm just, and that's my planner. The planner in me coming out is that it's good to have the levels because they support each other. But I agree with you, it's going to be complicated.
And again, just an example, I mentioned Heathrow expansion. Again, we wait to see the outcome of that, but we've got that, which is clearly a national issue. On our doorstep, we've got the new Universal theme park again, just on our doorstep. I mentioned East West Rail, HS2. These are wide issues that go beyond just Buckinghamshire. And there'll be and how do you accommodate new towns? We don't have any new towns in the first round. But if successful, there may be other new towns. And how do you make decisions about how those fit together within a strategic and then a local context? There's some big decisions in this part of the world, in the southeast, that need to be made. And if they're done in a disconnected way, then again, as a planner, you kind of say, well, actually, that's in no one's interest, because it just simply won't work. It needs to be joined up, and finding a way to join those things up is really important.
And that comes back in a way to your governance point, I think. It's about thinking of the different layers and I suppose responsibilities of different layers of governance, and that applies no matter how small or big the issue is, in my mind.
Completely right.
So In terms then of your route into a single unitary, do you think that there are things you would have done differently? And I'm going to ask a really, like, try and park COVID in that, yeah, because we're not going to have COVID in the next bit, hopefully.
I was going to say, yeah, look,
Yeah.
that's a brave thing to say, isn't it?
She puts it out there. It will be a different something, but yeah, hopefully not that. So what might you have done differently? So the committees you've already mentioned.
Yeah, so I think I mean, one thing I haven't mentioned that is probably worth mentioning here, and it will fall into the category of what would you have done differently. I think one of the difficulties we found as we moved into the new council was I don't think we were as cited as we needed to be on how the finances of the different authorities
Okay, yeah.
worked. So, and what I mean by that is that, again, and everywhere's different, and nobody was doing anything wrong. That was probably worth making that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
But people were financing different parts of their services in different ways,
Yeah.
so using planning delivery grant or fund or
Yeah.
external grants here and taking from reserves there to fund different posts within the service. And I think there were, again, partly because we were on a timetable to try and get this over the line.
Yeah.
We definitely were not as cited on that
Yeah.
as we needed to be. So then I think pretty clear within the first couple of months we had a bit of a black hole in the
Yeah.
service that it took us a while to get our heads around. Well, where's that come from? Why have we suddenly got millions of pounds gone missing out of the budget? And it was just different ways of accounting. And so in terms of what we would have done, I would have, now if I had my time again, I'd have the finance people crawling through every little detail about
Yeah.
let's kind of do the trace back from where from posts down to where the money comes from for each of those individual posts, because it became an issue for us quite quickly as a council that we needed to resolve. And obviously we resolved it, but
Yeah.
we didn't know what we didn't know. But if I had my time again, I would definitely do that. I think I would probably, and we talked about culture, I think I would probably spend more time before moving into the new council on that with the staff. I mean, our mantra at the time was we need to be safe and legal, and we spent therefore a lot of time making sure we got all the legal things in place and all the processes in place, which was all really important. But as I said earlier, we were in a position where we'd made appointments to our senior management team probably by the December before we went live in March, April. So we had probably 3 months where we knew who were going to be the senior managers in that, and we could have spent more time with the teams, kind of going through how do we want this to operate, what's it going to be like in this organisation, how does it work here, and I think the other thing would be, and again it comes back to what I was saying earlier, if you've got the ability to kind of challenge yourself to think less as a district or a small district and more as a unitary council, and again I recognise the circumstances might not allow you to do that, but if I had my time again, I think I would probably push harder, and again with the benefit of experience of having gone through it, I would be much clearer, I think, about actually we're not going to operate like that anymore. We're not going to operate as a district council anymore. We are going to be a big unitary council. We're going to have some big things to deal with, and everything's going to be multiplied by 10. So we need to think in those terms, and you need to take your politicians through that journey as well quite quickly to think about being a unitary rather than just a big district. And I think those I think for me were the kind of key bits that if I were doing it again, I'd try and get around quite quickly.
Yeah. And I think that culture piece as well is often missed. certainly we found at PAS that COVID created its own culture crisis in local
Yeah,
government, in
yeah,
planning services, and actually that still is working its way through. So, that working from home issue is certainly something that I think is going to take a few years to come through the system in terms of how people operate. And and if you think that councils going through reorganisation in this wave are going to have people who might have exclusively worked at home,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's a whole different model, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, but there's also some great opportunities as well that came out of that. I mean, we went through a period again in that very first lockdown where we literally people were at home, where we were challenging ourselves to how do we keep
Yeah,
some of the decisions coming out? How do you do site visits, for example? And do you need to do site
yeah,
visits to every single, is there a way in which you can ask people to submit photographs or videos or whatever it might be, in this new kind of digital age? Is there more you can do remotely? And again, I don't for any moment say that we've cracked it, but that experience has led us, and I'm sure has led others, to
yeah,
start to ask questions about how we do things, and
yeah,
do we always need to do it the way we've always done it? So and again, so as with anything, COVID or any other challenge, again, my advice would be take the challenge, but also look for the opportunities
yeah.
in it as well, because there always are some.
Yeah, and actually, most the procedural benefit of COVID is real.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
personal impact of COVID, I think, is the part
oh,
where
yeah.
we're seeing still the legacy, I suppose. So, in terms of you yourself, what are you most proud of, having taken the service from, going from your chief exec position in districts all the way to where you are now? What are you most proud of?
So we achieved a huge amount in the planning. So hopefully from today's conversation,
Mm,
you've probably picked up that there was, we had loads to do. We
yeah,
still have got loads to do. It's an ever moving, um, it's an ever moving feast that you never, it's like painting the fourth bridge, isn't it?
mm,
You think you've achieved it, but I think, we set out on day one, and we said this actually, on the outset when we embarked on the unitary journey. We want to have an excellent award-winning planning service, because,
yeah,
as one of the biggest planning services in the country, we
yeah,
wanted to start thinking in those terms. We want to be at the forefront of things. We want to be, a bit of a thought leader.
yeah, yeah,
And we got to year three, and we were successful in it, so that the planning kind of recognised us as the local authority of the year. And
mm,
and there was a group of us that went down to the awards in London, and it was great recognition
yeah,
for all of the teams who had put so much time and effort into getting the planning service into a place where, and despite all the challenges of COVID and everything else, we'd got ourselves into a place where, you know, teams within the service were really, really proud to say, I work for Buckinghamshire in the planning service, and we've done all this. And hearing people say those sorts of things, is what makes me proud. Because it's
yeah,
because I think we all come to work to enjoy doing a job,
yeah,
and we all want to make a difference. And you and I have talked about why we go into planning in the
yeah,
first place, and hearing members of staff be that proud of what they do and why they do it, it's fundamentally what helps drive me and motivates me. So, there'll be lots of things that I could pick on, I think, to say we were really proud of this and really proud of that. But fundamentally, getting the service into that sort of place um, was a great achievement for everybody concerned. Not just for me, but actually for the service itself and for everybody in it. It was a great achievement, and it was great to see. I mean, the day after or the week
yeah,
after the event, having the little trophy,
yeah,
in the office, kind of being paraded around. Um, was a great boost for everybody, actually, a real motivating factor, recognition of what they've achieved. So no, it's fabulous, that.
Yeah, and actually that bucks, doesn't it, a national trend? Because, if you see all the survey results, planners do feel quite demoralised in local government. And I think that as you were talking us through that, I just thought that's amazing. If your staff can say, I love working here, I love what I do, and I think I'm doing a good job, that is like the best, isn't it? That's winning. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and and it's not to say, I mean, because like every other local authority, we've got huge challenges. We've got massive financial challenges. We're having to make some really difficult choices across the board, and planning's not immune from that. But our mantra has always been, we'll find a way through it. We'll always look for new ways to do things, because there's always a different way of achieving the same outcome. And again, it comes back to that thing about not being wedded to always doing things the way we've always done it. And as soon as you're able to kind of get yourself off that hook of actually there's always a different way of doing this, then it's quite liberating, I think. It sends that kind of message of, well, okay, that's an issue for us. How do we get around it? How do we do it differently? And it's been a journey for everybody in the service, but I am very, very confident now that we've got people all the way through that service that will say, well, actually, let's find a way of doing this differently. And it's great to see, actually, great to see.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Anything you would like to add?
I think I'll probably just say, again, for those people listening in, I think, and again, hopefully, what this conversation has demonstrated is, yes, it's going to be challenging, because it always is. It's not an easy process to go through. But I think if you are prepared and kind of make plans, as planners, we love making plans, don't we? So make plans, and deliver them, but also kind of take advice from those people that have been through it. Take advice from people that are familiar with some of the issues that you're dealing with, and just be honest. Be honest with yourselves about what you can achieve and what can realistically wait until after vesting day. I think there's nothing that can't be fixed or undone after the day as well. So kind of don't beat yourself up too much that everything has to be done by a certain time.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And thank you so much, Steve. It's been a joy talking to you.
You too, and thanks, Anna.
Thank you.